Yesterday, we told you the new owner of San Diego County's two major newspapers, along with his business partner, are continuing to pitch their plan to do away with the Port of San Diego's 10th Avenue Marine Terminal. They propose building a new stadium and sports arena in its place. They say the terminal simply doesn't make enough money. iNews Source reporter Brad Racino has spent the last few months examining that claim. He files this report.
This is where they make cement. There's also a bunch of cargo that also comes into the Port of San Diego.
That's the captain of the Spirit of San Diego. I took this super touristy harbor cruise to get a better view of the downtown skyline, to see the hotels, the Navy warships, and one landmark that's causing a lot of commotion.
And here we got the Port of San Diego 10th Avenue Marine Terminal.
And there it is, 96 acres of cement sticking out into the bay between the Coronado Bridge and the Convention Center. On the ground, windmill towers line the open area between rows of warehouses. Longshoremen offload a ship docked along the northern berth, and trucks transport containers from the water's edge to supermarkets and retailers around the city. These are the good days, when things are busy. But right now, the Port District is defending itself from developers and critics who believe the good days are too few and far between, and the land at 10th Avenue would be better suited for hotels, a stadium, or a park. So how do you measure the value of a port, or better yet, one terminal? We began by looking at the rental agreements between the port and the companies operating on that terminal. There are 5 long-term tenants, the biggest and most well-known being Dole Food Company, which made headlines last month for signing a lease with the port that secured its 20 acres for the next 24 and a half years. John Lynch, CEO of UT San Diego, referred to this deal as
Chiquita banana caper
and called it
one of the great scandals of our time
during a presentation to the Harvard Business School Club in San Diego a few weeks back. The annual rent between the 5 companies ranges from about $1 per square foot to around $7 per square foot. And in combination with other charges, they generated around $5 million for the port this fiscal year. During the last fiscal year, all the tenants at 10th Avenue generated around $7.5 million. But what do numbers like that mean? I spoke with several experts around the country, and all agree you can't determine the value of a port by how much it makes per square foot or per terminal. Those numbers, they say, will always fail to impress.
So we need to earn revenue, but if that's all we meant to do, or all we were meant to do or mandated to do, then we wouldn't have any waterfront parks. In fact, we'd have probably figured out some way to build condominiums or, timeshares or hotels all the way around the waterfront.
Companies that are tenants here on the port, the longshoremen, the railroad people, pilots, tugs, everybody, and they're all good paying jobs.
Jerry Shipman lists some of the jobs this terminal supports. Of course, he has an interest in keeping this a working dock. He's the new president of the San Diego branch of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. But experts agree with Shipman. You have to look at all the jobs and companies associated with port activity, like truckers, customs brokers, federal agencies, and engineers. The port's most recent economic assessment was released in 2008. It says nearly 20,000 jobs in the region and the state were in some way related to activity at the terminals. But that was before the recession. Today, terminal opponents argue there aren't enough workers creating enough revenue to merit the sprawling waterfront real estate in America's finest city. Port supporters say once the terminal's gone, it's gone for good. And with it, you lose a rare, deep, and warm water port that provides well-paying, blue-collar jobs in an industry as old as the country itself.
Before I bombard you with all my naval knowledge I know about these naval ships.
On the Spirit of San Diego, you pass sparkling hotels, the sails of the convention center, green space, and then hunks of metal and pipes crisscrossing the open air of the terminal for the next half mile. A great view or an eyesore? It all depends on where you're standing. For the Investigations Desk of iNews Source and KPBS, I'm Brad Racino.
And joining me now is Brad Racino. Now, Brad, your report really focused on one part of activity at the port, and that was the leases. But there's a lot more going on. Tell me more about that.
Well, once a shipment comes into the port, that's not where it stops. There are other agencies that have dealings with the port in terms of getting it out. So you have to look at the truckers and the customs brokers, as I said in the package, and the railway agencies, the pilots, the tugboats. Everybody has a stake in the game.
Now, you know you've been working on this for a very long time, and you took a lot of this information, all of this research, and you packaged it in a very different way online. Tell me about that.
Well, in researching this story, I spoke with many experts who said that in order to understand this issue, you can't just look at the leases, you have to look at the whole thing. So that's what we tried to do, was present the whole thing to the public, to look at not only the leases and the revenue, but all the companies associated with the port, what the mayoral candidates have to say about this issue, what experts in the region have to say about this issue. So it's a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about the 10th Avenue Terminal.
And that's at kpbs.org/port, interactive feature. I urge people to go there. Thank you, Brad Versino. Well, yesterday, Congressman and mayoral candidate Bob Filner responded to part one of our report by demanding the release of records of any communications between his rival, Carl DeMaio, and the owners of UT San Diego. Last week, before our story, Congressman Filner came to the KPBS studios to talk with me about the stadium proposal. Here is that pre-recorded interview. Mayoral candidate Congressman Bob Filner has made the 10th Avenue Terminal an important part of his economic plan if elected mayor. He joins me now. Congressman, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
First, let's get a couple of things on the record. As you know, the owner of the newspaper, Doug Manchester, the CEO of the paper, John Lynch, have both proposed building a new Charger Stadium, a big sports complex, at the site of the 10th Avenue Terminal. Do you support their plan?
No, I don't. In fact, they support the other candidate, and so I assume he's the one that's going to support this. But I think that would damage irretrievably the biggest opportunity we have for expansion of middle-class jobs in San Diego, and that's the 10th Avenue Terminal. So I say that's a non-starter.
I want to go back to that plan that you have, but one last thing on the record. We also obtained an email from John Lynch sent to a port commissioner August 10th. In that email, he says he has the support of one of the mayoral candidates, and I just want to read to you what he says. He says, "We actually have made significant progress with labor, chargers, county, business, Navy, and one of the mayoral candidates." Is that you?
I don't think it's me, so they've never talked to me. They... As I like to say, by the way, Carl DeMaio says reform in every other word that he uses. Reform means real estate for Manchester. That is, I think that's what Papa Doug at the Union Tribune really wants. He wants the mayor to approve his property adjustments and zonings at Mission Valley, downtown, and the port terminal.
Well, I'll tell you, Carl DeMaio was here the other day, and he said it's not him either.
Well, then they better decide that they endorsed the wrong candidate, because it's certainly no for me. And they have said, by the way, and I think this is very inappropriate, the editor was quoted on tape as saying they're going to do everything they can to stop the election of Bob Filner for mayor. I don't think that's the way our daily paper ought to be proceeding.
I want to talk more about your plan with regard to the 10th Avenue Terminal. How do you plan to increase economic activity?
As a port, as I've said on several occasions, is our best, I think, avenue in the future for the expansion of middle-class jobs. And the port has a plan for the expansion of both 10th Avenue and for the terminal at National City, which is the two places where we do most of the cargo. They want to modernize all the facilities. They want to make sure we have the infrastructure for what we call bulk goods. There's container ports like Los Angeles. We're never going to compete with Los Angeles, so we're going to have a niche market. And they want to make sure that the infrastructure is there, that there are routes in and out of the port, taking into account the sensitivity and the quality of life in our neighborhoods around there. They want to make sure that there are marine highways built, for example. And this is a really important thing. Imagine if we could put on barges bulk material from here to LA or San Francisco or Seattle. We could take thousands of trucks off the road. And I'm going to be working with the mayors of those other cities and to make sure that we have those marine highways. But we can and we have to go international. I mean, the mayor ought to be leading the way toward welcoming other cities and other countries toward expanding their trade with San Diego.
Now, there's long been a debate in terms of the value of the 10th Avenue Terminal, and we've been doing a lot of stories about it as well. I know that the leases, the tenants bring in, I think it's about $7.5 million per year to this terminal. Do you renegotiate those leases? Do you get new tenants? What do you do specifically to say that this terminal is really sort of paying its way?
Well, we need to modernize it. Many of the structures have to be modernized. But we just, by the way, negotiated a new lease. I should say the port just negotiated a new lease with Dole Fruit Company for fruit coming in on in 10th Avenue. And in that lease, that renegotiation, they agreed to build modernized facilities, for example. So we're going to, it's going to take a process. But you can bring in new infrastructure. You can bring in new ways of intermodal transport. You may have to look. I mean, in the port of the future is going to have what we call inland ports. That is, you do much of the intermodal transport more inland, and find the ways to transport between the port and that inland facility. There are many ways. The port administration now, I think, is on a good path toward increasing the cargo, increasing the capacity, and to making us. We're the biggest city on the east or west coast that does not seen as a maritime center,
right.
And I think we can do that.
You mentioned the Dole lease, and I know we have some tape of John Lynch talking about that lease. I think he refers to it as the Chiquita banana caper, and he goes on to say, look, that you've got a port, you've got a marine terminal generating, whether it's $7 or $5 million. If you put 2 hotels at that site, it could generate millions, tens of millions of dollars for the city. Doesn't he have a point, or do people on that side of the argument have a point?
He has a point if you're just thinking hotels and low wage jobs. Right now, the port generates directly and indirectly about 46,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. And in fact, a typical longshoreman, tough work, but he makes or she makes $125,000 a year. Not the low wage jobs that the hotels and Mr. Manchester have built their money on. But we're talking about potentially thousands and thousands of new jobs, good paying middle class jobs that we lost when the defense industry was lost here. So he's looking at the old San Diego, where we build a few people, build a few hotels, pay a lot of people minimum wage, and they get all of the benefits of the port. Meanwhile, thousands of working people are denied that kind of job. So it's time for a new way to look at it.
One last thing. Has John Lynch, Doug Manchester ever contacted you
No,
to talk about their plan? Never asked you about it? Okay.
I did read their editorial, but they have never
They
talked
never
to me.
consulted you. Okay, Congressman Bob Filner, thanks for being here.
Thank you.